life is chaotic and messy, beautiful and devastating, but I think it would be like that no matter what the choices are. And so why not make the choices that feel like fun and adventure, feel like they're going to open you up and make you feel like you're making a difference in the world?
You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author and professional speaker and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. It ain't over yet because we got another person to shout out on this session of the Gratitude Moment, baby. And this Gratitude Moment is set aside for a good friend of mine, Eric L. Williamson. He is the best-selling author of the book How to Work with Jerks, and me and Eric go way back. Dude was one of my role models in Toastmasters when I first started back in 2013 and early 2014 when I learned about contests. I heard him give this awesome speech about his trip to Puerto Rico and the story how he was able. Well, you'll have to attend one of the workshops or one of the speeches, keynote conferences to hear the full story. But definitely hearing him and seeing him speak inspires me, and he was definitely my role model starting out. He's a good friend of mine. You definitely want to check out the past episode that we had last May of 2018 where he talked about his new book, How to Work with Jerks. Heck, you can go to Amazon.com and pick up a copy or two of his book after listening to this interview too, and just be inspired, and heck, even have some tools to up your emotional intelligence game of how to not only work with jerks but be the best version of yourself. Eric, thanks a bunch for being one heck of an awesome dude, and looking forward to more of the awesome things we're going to be doing in the world together, my friend. Keep shooting for the moon. And today on the Going North podcast, where we bring you super special, awesome humans from all over the globe, today's no different, because today's guest, she has an engineer's brain and a poet's heart. And when you read the first few chapters of her book, you will see why. Her life's work has been centered around the integration of seemingly unrelated things and the subsequent solution of wickedly hard problems. This awesome person right here is a speaker, author, and thought leader in innovation that facilitates massive leaps forward by helping individuals and organizations with big ideas to make connections that they've been missing. She believes that innovation is for everyone and holds the key to both personal fulfillment and lasting global change. You heard that right, folks, global change. And this wonderful lady right here is the author of Spiral, a catalyst for innovation and expansion, a new approach to the creative process, using engineering design methodology with cycles of nature and entrepreneurship. And not only that, she's also the CEO of a renewable energy company. So she is doing some super special, awesome things that is probably a Noah's Ark size of awesomeness. I'm not going to hesitate anymore and introduce this awesome person right here, the super special, amazing Amy Simpkins. How are you today, ma'am?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Dom. That was a fantastic introduction.
Oh, yes, indeed. Definitely had to make sure the introduction has some sprinkles on it, because it's a giant cupcake. Or an ice cream sundae, if you prefer.
I'm definitely about the ice cream sundae.
Sweet. That's only a couple days away. This is great. Yes, indeed. Well, as with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 47 days long, so mine filling in some gaps where I may have missed some things and let us know all about the wonderful AS herself.
Oh, thanks. No, I mean that was fairly complete. I mean, I do a lot of things. My mission in life, what I strive for is to have adventures, to live life to the fullest, to explore more, and to see like what I can learn so that I can help. So I really think that, like, the line you read there about, innovation holds the key to personal fulfillment and lasting global change. That's kind of what I strive for in life, in summary, is, personal fulfillment on my own individual level, but also like, how can I be of better service? And so that results in some like kind of crazy adventures, in addition to being involved in entrepreneurship and business, both as a coach and a CEO of a consulting startup myself. I also travel a lot with my family. I'm married. I have 3 precious children, and we travel as a family, and we learn together. We part-time homeschool, and so like constant, never-ending learning is part of my environment all the time, as a parent, as a human, as an adult, as an entrepreneur. Like, that's kind of how I've structured my life, and that's what keeps it interesting for me, that like constant learning.
That's right, constant learning indeed, constant learning indeed. And the beautiful thing about it is that you're like a lady with many talents. So I also heard that not only that you graduated from MIT University, you also was a vocal minor in college, right? Was that high school?
I was a vocal music minor in college. I was actually telling a friend about this today, that I actually considered double majoring in aeronautics and astronautics and then vocal music. And it was a huge passion. It got me through college to be involved in the arts. Surprisingly, it's always funny how you evolve. I thought music was something that would absolutely stay with me throughout my life, and it's kind of taken a back seat for right now. I often say that, maybe once my kids are out of the house, I'll go back and join a choir. I try to sing with choirs whenever I can. I really love choral singing, because choir is one of those things where the whole is much, much greater than the sum of the parts. And so to be part of something that powerful and a group that synchronous is a really special thing. My cousin just got married actually a couple of weeks ago, and he was a music major in college. He wrote a cantata for his wedding, and he asked, I know, it's crazy. So like, he's the groom, and he's like, I just wrote all of the music for my wedding, and like with orchestra and choir. And so he asked his friends and family to be part of the music, and I got to sing in the choir at his wedding, and it was just so fulfilling to be back in the saddle and like singing again. And I'm like, yeah, any opportunity I get to do it, I get back there. But I think, at some point you got to make choices about what's important, and the things that are important to you in one phase of life may not be as important in other phases, and they may come back again. And I think we all have to, like, our culture has this kind of obsession with people who do things for really long times. And like, they've been doing it for 20 years, or they've done so many hundreds of events, or, things like that. And that's cool for sure. But I also think, we need to be able to allow ourselves the opportunity for growth, the grace of changing, because, music was a lifeline for me in college. There's absolutely no doubt that it was critical to my emotional survival during that, like, probably really difficult period of time. And it's not that important to me right now. It isn't a lifeline right now, and that's all right. There are other things that I go to. You and I, Dom, were just talking about Taekwondo. Like, Taekwondo has become a huge outlet for me, a place where I find community, a place where I find balance. And that's kind of like one of my lifelines right now. So it's funny how things change. If you had asked me when I was in college, how do you feel about martial arts? How do you feel about taking up Taekwondo? I'm like, what? Why would I do that? So it's funny how you grow. It's funny how you come into new things, and, different things can be important in different phases.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. Very true indeed. And it's a beautiful thing. It's like you're an innovation expert because you've innovated things constantly. And heck, the beautiful thing about it is, since you're a singer, will there be an audiobook soon of Spiral from the author?
There will be. I'm so glad you asked about that. I actually just wrapped recording on the audiobook a couple weeks ago. It's with my editor and audio engineer right now. And I don't have a release date for it yet, but I am hoping that I'm thinking that it will be early fall, which is actually, it's kind of interesting because I released Spiral in paperback and ebook format on September 18th, 2018. And I feel that the audiobook is going to come out just almost exactly 1 year later. So I think that's kind of cool.
Congratulations. That'll be a nice birthday gift to myself since I'm a September baby.
Oh, that's nice. My third baby is my September baby. He was born 3 hours prior to the moment of fall equinox.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty cool.
Nice. That's what I'm talking about. Definitely going to copy that too when it releases. Well, speaking of audiobooks, let's move on to the actual book itself. So, with all of your experience and everything, just the wonderful life that is still meant to be lived, what led to you just deciding, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and write and publish this book right here?
Well, you can probably tell that I'm full of big ideas. Like, I think big thoughts. I think I had a friend tell me that, like, in elementary school. I was a little kid, and a friend of mine said to me, "You think bigger thoughts than I do," and that's like, I think that is something about my personality that, like, my brain goes off on these wild tangents that turn into epic ideas pretty quickly. It's just how my brain works, and part of that is seeing trends across time, seeing links and analogies between different subjects that seem like they're completely unrelated. And so I went through a period of really intense personal growth and identity shift when I left my corporate engineering job. I majored in engineering at MIT, and then I worked in corporate engineering in a very cool industry. I was in aerospace, and for 10 years. And I thought I was a lifer. I thought that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life, until all of a sudden I wanted to try something new. I wanted to do something different, and that was really shocking to me, that all of a sudden I started to have other interests, and I was curious about what else I could do. And I had not only had I not seen myself as an entrepreneur in the past, but I actually said, I am not an entrepreneur personality type. Like, I don't think I could ever do that, start a business. And I've now started about 3 or 4 different businesses. And so it's, again, funny how life changes you. And so as I went through my own personal revolution, my own intense personal growth, and I had seen, I'd been trained in engineering. I had seen how engineering was done, and then I started to move into business and entrepreneurship and starting a business. And it occurred to me that, wow, like the principles that I'm using, the techniques that I'm using to build out my business and create service offerings and to serve people and to create value for people are exactly the same processes, exactly the same design techniques that I used as an engineer. And I was like, I can see that, like, building a business is just an exercise in design. very similar to, some kind of technical design. So I kind of was making those connections. And then as I was making those connections, I was like, wow, actually these processes that I go through to design either a technical system in engineering or a business system as an entrepreneur, I'm actually going through that right now in my personal life as I'm going through this major shift of who am I really, what do I really want to do in this next phase of my life, and I'm asking these big questions about purpose and passion and career and even just identity. Who am I? And it was it was the same kind of a process because I felt like I wanted to design my own life, and it just became another exercise in design, and I could use the same principles from engineering or from business, and it's all the same across the board. So that was sort of the root of the book, that I had these ideas and I could see the patterns. I could see how the patterns were the same, and I knew very early on, I was like, this is going to be a book. Like, I could write a book about this. But I knew it wasn't the right time yet. Like, I had to learn more about it. I'm kind of a scientist at heart, and I had to see if it was repeatable. And so I started taking my business coaching and consulting clients through the process to test to see if it was just me that could use this pattern, this framework, or if it was applicable to everybody. And the response that I got, the positive response, was overwhelming, of people who said, this is just a burden lifted. This feels so natural. I don't feel like I'm fighting the tide anymore. Like, why didn't I see this before? Because it's all right there in front of me. Like, I should have seen it. And so once I sort of got that confirmation, it was time to write it down. It was time to put it out into the world. And there was just kind of one moment where I was like, okay, it's time. Go, write. And it was a year from the time I said I'm going to start writing to the time I launched the book, which felt like actually a really good amount of time. So that's the book story.
A great story indeed, and I really resonated with part one of the book where you mentioned how, like, all these entrepreneurs got these straight line programs where it's like, yeah, success is a straight line. Do this in 30 days, 6 weeks. You'll have the success I had because this is what I did and it worked for me. And you realize, oh, no, it's just like probably program number 47 on the way to number 50 that'll finally work.
Right. And, like, it's not that you're not learning through all 54 of those programs. You learn a little more every time, which is why program number 54 eventually works. It's like Edison with the light bulb. That, like, you have to go through so many, like, times through the cycle, to your own cycle. And I think, the most important part of thinking about design as a spiral, innovation as a spiral, any kind of development as a spiral or cyclical process, is not actually the steps of the spiral process, because the steps of the spiral process are pretty intuitive. Like, you kind of know what they are, like, intuitively. But the most important part is the willingness to spend those early spirals not really knowing where you're going. There's this, and I talk about that in the book. It's kind of halfway through that, like, you go at the beginning. During your first iterations, your first cycles, you are in this time of mystery where you don't have it all figured out. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of unknowns. And we humans are uncomfortable with that. It feels risky to us. That feels dangerous. It feels unstable. But that's really where the magic happens. And, like, it's when we get really uncomfortable with that mystery as fast as possible. So, yes, I'm going to sign up for this course that tells me they're going to give me the magical 5 steps that solve all of my problems. And then I won't feel confused anymore. But the thing is that anytime you're creating something new, you necessarily need to spend some time in confusion, because that allows you to create a new solution. It allows you to have a breakthrough. And so, what would happen? And saying, like, I need to fix this confusion as soon as possible. Or to say, oh, hey, look at that. I'm confused. Like, maybe I need to, like, think about this. My father-in-law, who was a machinist before he retired, and a really like very talented designer and solver of problems, he used to say, "I'm playing with my mental blocks." And I really love that turn of phrase, because there's so much to it that like we think that mental blocks are bad things. We think that feeling stuck on a mental block is a bad thing. But what if a mental block was just a play toy that you could spend some time with? And like the word play is so important because it introduces this element of fun to it. Instead of seeing a mental block as something to fight against or overcome, what if we could see it as something to have fun with and play with and like invent with and innovate with? And that's where I always come back to, is that like that's where breakthroughs happen. That's where innovation happens, is allowing yourself to be confused, to be in the unknown, and to spend some time figuring it out instead of rushing toward the first thing that seems to present a solution.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's almost like Legos in a way with mental blocks.
Yes. And isn't it fun? It's fun to go like just noodle around with some Legos.
Heck yeah. Just keep some shoes on, that's all.
That's for sure. Oh my goodness. My oldest, well, my older two are 8 and 7, and we are like in the thick of Lego right now. And oh man, the pain in the feet, it's intense.
Sweet. Just random tangent question. You ever built a spaceship with Legos?
I mean, I built a like play spaceship with Legos. I've never built a spaceship that's actually flown with Legos, but I have helped build a spaceship that's actually flown. So it's kind of an interesting question.
Oh yeah. God, it took me half literal. That's funny. It would be funny too. It's like, I built a toy spaceship, and also used Lego parts on a real spaceship. You can tell them. I no longer work there, so they don't have to know. It's like, the spaceship blasts off, and then out of nowhere, you're like floating in space, and then on the screen it says, "Amy Simpkins is awesome. Buy the book Spiral" in the year 2019 on the screen.
Exactly. You have so much power. So much power. I mean, they do that. They put there are little in-jokes all over, technology, I mean, and that's what, like I think there's a lot of stigma about engineers, being like stodgy or unemotional, and like engineers are really like goofy, silly people a lot of times. And we send, coded messages up on spacecraft and stuff like that. But like, my husband is a electrical engineer. He, his first career was as an integrated circuit designer. So like microchips, right? He would design chips. And apparently it's a thing, and I didn't know this. Apparently it's a thing for a designer to etch messages into their chips. Like along with the actual functional electrical circuits, they like put little cartoons in there and little messages. So he put our initials with a heart on his chip, and then he showed it to me under a microscope, because it's a microchip, so like you can't see it with the naked eye, but if you look at it under a microscope, you can see that he had etched in it our initials with a heart, like on a tree. And I was like, it was the most romantic thing I'd ever seen in my life. That's how nerdy I am. That's what wooed me right there.
And it's awesome folks like you that are on this podcast for a reason. You're definitely right, because like a couple engineers I met in my life, heck, even fellow podcaster Tony Wadley, 365 Driven. He's a car guy, he's an engineer, and he's a pretty fun guy. Does all this social stuff, social media, and a Toastmaster buddy of mine. He's into Star Wars and does lightsaber fights, and he even does karate too. So yeah, you're right. And engineers aren't really as boring as people make them out to be. It's just that they just are entertained by other things. Everybody's entertained by something else.
Exactly. And even integrated circuits can be art. See,
Heck yeah. That's freaking awesome too, and it's just definitely not an everyday thing either.
No, for sure.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right. And the beautiful thing is that I guess the message through the book Spiral is that success is not a straight line. It's not a squiggly line. It's a spiral.
Yeah, like that's what I like to bring to people, that like we either want to say that like our path is, we like it to be linear, some sort of straight line, because that's simpler. Like we think that we should just start out at point A and point ourselves toward point B, and we're going to go straight there. And I mean, I think everyone who's a grown-up knows that that's not how it goes. It like so very, very rarely goes that way. And yet we keep hoping that it will go that way. But it's like you can't do that. You can't start by expecting it to be linear. But on the other hand, it's not total chaos either. Like our paths don't just wander. Like they do have these like patterns and these general trends. And it's not surprising, and this is kind of what I wrote about in the book, that it's not surprising that these trends have patterns, because like we live on a cyclical planet. Like the earth moves through seasons, and not every year is exactly the same as the previous year, but the pattern is the same, that we go through spring and summer and autumn and winter, and we know kind of what to expect, generally speaking. And even if it's not exact, we have a wet spring one year and a hot summer the next year, like we know kind of what to expect. And it's the same thing. Like we are citizens of a cyclical planet, and we're cyclical beings. That like a lot of times our paths through life are not as chaotic as we think they are. That even if they do vary and we certainly grow, we move through, the patterns are still there. That we're all, the pattern of growth looks sort of similar as we go through. And it's these cycles of growth that actually look a lot like the cycles of the earth. And when you say like there's like these periods of ideas sprouting, and there's these periods of harvest, emotional harvest, and like resource harvest, and then there's these times where you just want to rest and like curl up with an Afghan and a hot cup of hot chocolate, and like that's all part of the process.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Part of the process. Yes, ma'am, indeed. And the beautiful thing about the process is I'm pretty sure there's always like the evaluation piece, which is like the last part. So do you think that time management would be a part of that phase? Because you're doing all of these things. You got 2 or 3 businesses and this book and promoting it, and a part-time homeschooling mom. So like, how do you balance all of that?
I mean, the short answer is that I don't. It's crazy and it's chaotic, and I frequently ask myself if I can really be doing all of this, if I should be doing all of this, if it's too much stress, if it's not enough sleep, if I'm really giving enough attention to the things that matter to me. But there's no control for life. You don't know what would have happened if you had tried something or hadn't tried something. And I think all we can do is, in the moment, give ourselves the grace of what we need in the moment, while keeping in mind the vision of what we're trying to move towards, to show them the world that's important to me. And just because it's important to me doesn't mean it needs to be important to anybody else. And I often look at the 2 sides of the business, and I'm like, would I be more effective if I focused on one or focused on the other? And right now, every time I ask a question, I come back to, I really, really love and care about both of these kind of topics. And I really feel like I'm still making an impact in both of these areas. And this is where I want to be right now. And I say that, like the key phrase in that is, every time I ask the question. because I ask myself the question a lot, and that's part of the spiral, like you just said, this reevaluation is saying, like, am I still in line with where I want to be heading right now? And I asked myself that, as a corporate engineer, and the answer was shockingly no. I thought I was in it for life, and one day I dared to ask myself, is this still what I want? And I was like, no, I don't think it is. And so that's why I ask myself the questions a lot, because it could change, it could evolve. There could be a day when I really choose one single-minded focus and I move in that direction. And we talk about it all the time. There could be a day when it makes sense for my kids to go to regular school and for us to and that's what our life will look like, which will be different at that time. And so we just constantly ask ourselves the question, like, is this still what we're headed toward? Is still how we can make a big difference? Are we still happy as individuals? And is it still good for our family? And if we're checking that all the time, kind of the day-to-day chaos, it doesn't matter so much. Because I honestly believe, like, if I wasn't doing all the crazy stuff, I know what it's like. I've seen people who have kids in regular school. It's just a different kind of crazy, because then you have to hound your kids about homework, and you got to pack a lunch every single day, and you got to catch the bus, and you have to be on time, which is all of that stuff you don't have to worry about when you're a homeschooler. And so, like, I really believe it, and this is true for, like, most areas of parenting. All parenting is chaos. It doesn't matter which path you choose. We often joke, like, we travel with our kids, and a lot of people are like, oh, my gosh, like, I can't believe you take kids on travel. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, they're going to fight with each other at home. They may as well fight with each other in a fun location. That's that's what parenting is like. And so that's, when you ask about balancing the whole thing, like, life is chaotic and messy and beautiful and devastating, but I think it would be like that no matter what the choices are. And so why not make the choices that feel like fun and adventure, feel like they're going to open you up and make you feel like you're making a difference in the world?
That's right. The good kind of difference, whether it be heads, tails, or in the middle.
I hope so.
Oh, man. And you mentioned asking yourself questions. So what's probably the most powerful question that you ask yourself that others should probably ask themselves as well in this journey of life that you've been on so far?
Oh, man, that is a question. And I know exactly what it is, but, like, yeah, that goes, like, really deep. You're not messing around with that question. So I struggled for a long time with, I didn't know I was struggling, actually. So I won't say I was struggling. For a long time, I saw my job title as my identity. Someone had asked me, like, who are you, Amy? I would say, I'm an engineer. Engineer wasn't my discipline. It wasn't my major. It wasn't my job title. It was, like, who I was. And that's sort of, like, disordered, actually. It's not true. Engineer is something that I do. It's not who I am. And one of the biggest pieces of my own, like, personal revolution, my own awakening was, and I think it's a quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer, who said, you're a human being, not a human doing. And so the most powerful question that I ask myself, and now I've learned to ask myself this question, is who do you want to be? And that question, and to put that alongside, what do you want to do? And distinguish the two. And to realize that both of those pieces are really powerful pieces of a vision for my life, of, setting goals, setting intentions, that, like, it's not just about what I want to do. It starts with who I want to be, which is a different question. And that's been the most powerful thing.
Nice. Nice indeed, nice indeed. Especially with the Wayne Dyer quote. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
He was wise for sure, and he really affected the way that I grew during that time of life.
Would you say he's your favorite author?
No. I mean, no, he's fantastic, but I mean, and this sounds because like totally different genre and totally different like impact, but like the person who has really affected me the most was Seth Godin. And Seth Godin was the first person who wrote words about like questioning kind of the corporate machine for me. That was like, you don't have to follow the path just because they said it was the path. And I was like, what? I never, because I think, okay, so we talked about engineer personality types, and like I do, like engineers are fun and goofy and emotional, and yes, engineers there are some engineers who love hugs, contrary to popular opinion, but I think it is something about engineers that see and part of it is the way our career paths are laid out, that like it's, getting an engineering degree, it's a professional degree. So once you graduate with engineering, you're expected to practice as a professional engineer. And like maybe you go on and get a graduate degree, and your graduate degree could take you to another discipline. But generally speaking, like the path is pretty well defined. And then once you have this corporate engineering job, again, the path of like gaining experience and like kind of moving through the ranks of engineering it's a pretty well-defined path. So to like have someone say, you don't have to follow the path just because someone else said it was the path was revolutionary for me and totally mind-blowing. Never crossed my mind that there could be a different way to do things. And so that was, I really like Seth Godin. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea. I really like his short, punchy writing style. I really like that he leaves open-ended questions. He writes in a simple way that is really high impact, and I love that.
Heck yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, he's a freaking beast. Yes, indeed. Books for days. And actually, I'm a big fan of smaller, punchier books because I mean, folks don't have time for 500 pages, especially 2019, where goldfish are kicking our butts with longer attention spans. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm a book junkie. I love books, and it was a little bit eye-opening when I wrote Spiral. Like I had my book that I was selling at a conference, and I had people come by the table, and they were like, "Do you have an audiobook?" And I'm like, "Oh, not yet." And they're like, "I only do audiobooks. I own no paper books anymore." And my jaw about hit the floor. And like, it's incredible, like how the evolution, like, yeah, people don't take time. And I mean, I consume books in like every format. So like at any given time, I'm reading like 3 paperback books, 2 ebooks, and 3 audiobooks, So I get the draw of each format, but I think you're right. It's interesting, like what people have time to consume. We're just bombarded with so much information.
That's right. Hitting this from all angles. That's right.
Yes, for sure.
But the good news is there's folks like us who still appreciate a good paperback or hardback copy of a book.
Yeah, I don't like to like give sweeping predictions about the future, or or I sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but I'm like, there's nothing like holding paper in your hands. You can't replace that feeling and the smell and the total sensory experience of holding a book. Yeah. That's me sounding like, I'll be a dinosaur soon, so.
Hey, dinosaurs rock. I mean, they start with D in their name, right? So D's rock, right?
D's definitely rock. You got
Heck
it.
yeah. That's right. And the meme with electronic stuff is like, I'm pretty sure you've probably seen the meme before, the whole e-book reader Kindle gloating about, yeah, I could do all this. What can you do, paper? And then the paperback book or hardback book just grows an arm and just turns it off and it falls on the ground.
Right? Yes, I've seen that one. Exactly.
It's like, yeah, books are still going to win, darn it. May not print as many, but books are still going to win. They still have to make the technology tap on out. That's right.
Mhm.
Especially if there's a power outage and you're going back to a candle. It's like, yeah. And then probably pull out one of those druid robes. I'm like, yeah, this is old school right here. Oh, man. Well, before I add more of my nonsense, I'll just pull out the question I ask every guest, and that is, if you were to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in the current year of 2019, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, dear goodness. Oh, being 25.
It's only 3 years.
So first of all, no, not really. It's not only 3 years. First of all, I just want to state, like, for the record, I have absolutely no desire to go back to 25. Well, actually, 25 was kind of the start of the upswing. Like, I think your 20s are really hard. I personally love aging. I love the wisdom that I gain with every year. I have loved my 30s. I'm looking forward to my 40s. I'm so excited for them. And I look back at my 20s and I'm like, oh, geez, girl. Like, but, you know, and I spent so much time. I mean, I always have been a worrier. I spent so much time worrying about if I was going to find a man. Here I am, and I have 3 children, so we're good. Worrying if, like, what was going to happen with my career, if I was going to achieve my goals, worrying if I was, doing enough at work, like, and it's just like I want you to calm down, Amy, 25-year-old Amy. Like, stop and smell the roses is so cliche, but, like, it's so true. Like, stop for a minute and look around you. And I remember, so I moved to Colorado right after grad school. That was where my first corporate job was, first and last corporate job. And when I moved to Colorado, I really wanted to hike in the mountains. And so there was this friend at work who was a prolific climber. And to this day, he's one of those crazy athletes that does, like, ultra marathons and, like, runs for hundreds of miles at a time and things like that. So he's, like, just in incredible shape, incredible athlete. He agreed to, like, take me out on my first Colorado 14,000-foot peak. And I was all nervous and everything. And, like, we would go out hiking, and, like, he would basically just, like, put his head down and, like, go for the summit. And, like, it was nothing but the summit. And I would be like, oh, wow, look at these purple flowers over here. Do you know what they're called? And he's like, what? There are purple flowers? Like, no, I don't know what they're called. Like, I didn't even know there were purple flowers, I don't know what purple flowers grow in Colorado. And I would stop and I'm like, oh my, like, we'd come over a ridge and I'm like, this view is incredible. And he's like, and he'd stop and go, oh yeah, it is actually. Like, I'd be really surprised. And, like, I think it's funny because that whole experience happened when I was about 24. I was hiking with him a lot. So I think that's appropriate, like that approach. Now, in that case, I was the one who was stopping to enjoy the view, to look at the flowers, to realize that it's not all about the summit. I mean, when you hike, you're on the summit for such a short amount of time. And honestly, usually the summit is cold and windy. Like, and you're like, okay, I want to go down. And so if you can't enjoy the getting there, like, what's the point? And I think that's in my 20s, when, as a 25-year-old, I was very summit obsessed. I was very obsessed with, like, dating to get married, to have the family and, like, get to that point in my life where I was married and had the family. I was very obsessed with pursuing my career goals and doing things right at work so that I could achieve the titles that I wanted and apply to the programs that I wanted. And, like, all of my measures of success were accomplishments, were milestones, were summits. And I didn't do a lot of that in my own life, of stopping to enjoy the view, of appreciating right where I was, and of, most importantly, of saying to myself, like, in this moment, you're enough right now. Like, you don't have to worry about if you're enough at work, because you are. Like, you don't have to worry about if you're enough in a friendship or a relationship, because you are. Like, and that was something I didn't understand. I thought I needed to do more. I needed to be more. I needed to achieve more. So that's it. Like, I don't know what that is. Stop and smell the roses is kind of a cliche, but, like, don't be quite so summit obsessed. You got to enjoy the journey.
Beautiful advice. Sounds like a future blog entry for you.
That's a good idea. I might take your advice.
That's right. Don't be summit obsessed. That is so darn true right there. And heck, I'm guilty of that myself. It's so true. It's like, yeah, you're so focused on the summit, but it's kind of like you get to that goal, and then it's like, all right, is that all? All right, what's next? And then you get the metaphorical wind. It's cold and chilly. You take the picture of the flag, and then if you're really into it, you make sure the flag has your face on it, take a selfie, and just go back down the mountains. Like, yeah, but no, just enjoy the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, indeed. Well, all right. For those who want to keep in contact with you, especially when that audiobook releases, what's the best way to reach out to the wonderful Amy?
Well, the best way is to come to my website, amysimpkins.com, and maybe you'll find a blog post about not being summit obsessed and enjoying the journey there, because I blog there and I talk about innovation and I talk about the links between personal development and business development, tech development, and all sorts of crazy big ideas, because that's who I am, is the queen of big ideas. But that if you get on my mailing list on that website, I will be sending out announcements about the audiobook coming soon. I'm also starting a cool new retreat with a joint venture partner of mine called Business Inside Out, and it's about taking more of that slow burn approach to business and saying, like, it's okay to not know. Like, that's where the magic happens. How can you support that process of being okay with the confusion and having breakthroughs and then doing something really innovative? So that's coming soon. You can find out about that on there. And but my favorite social media platform is Facebook. You can find me at Amy Simpkins Innovation Catalyst on Facebook. And if you happen to be interested in renewable energy, because I do that too, we're at mugrid.com, mugrid.com.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. It was a pleasure having the Queen of Big Ideas on the podcast. Is that a moniker on a T-shirt or a name tag or something?
I should. I like the idea of a T-shirt with, like, a crown on it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right, the Queendom, baby, the Queendom. Yes, indeed. The Amy Simpkins Queendom, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Go on ahead and head over to Amazon, check out the show notes. Buy a copy of the book. Heck, buy 3 copies of the book. You know what? There's 4 stages of innovation, so buy 4 copies of the book and gift them out to people. It's fabulous. And I wasn't kidding the introduction, because she has a poet's heart. The book is very well written. I'm a fan of it myself. Looking forward to the audiobook. and all the other awesome stuff that Amy has coming out in the wonderful world. So any parting words for our folks still listening, Amy?
Allow your process to be iterative, whether that's at work or at home or within yourself. You are both enough in this moment, and you have the capability for a bigger, better vision of the future. It's all inside you right now, and I believe in you.
Hey there, buddy. Looks like you made it to the end of this episode. Since you made it to the end of this episode, do both of us a favor and stop being greedy and share this episode with your friends and your fellow podcast lovers, especially those who have book clubs and want to listen to the authors who write some amazing books. Be sure to check out the rest of the backlog too while you're at it, and share all those too. And in order to make the rest of your week the best of your week, remember to advance others, to advance yourself.